Elon Musk has a reputation. He promises electric rockets, underground tunnels, and self-driving cars that don't exist yet. He promises timelines that slip, schedules that shift, and deadlines that become suggestions rather than commitments. So when he unveiled the Tesla Robovan at an invite-only event in October 2024 and said it would be in production by 2027, the question wasn't what it is, it was whether it's actually possible. We investigated. We looked at the technology, the timelines, the regulations, the economics, and the competitive landscape. Here's what we found about whether Tesla can pull off its most ambitious people-moving vision yet. The stage was set at Warner Brothers Studios in Hollywood on October 10th, 2024, an invite-only event. Musk arrived in a two-seat cybercab, the company's autonomous Robotaxi that would steal most of the headlines that night. But as the cameras panned across the soundstage, something else emerged, something unexpected, something that looked like it had traveled through time from the 1930s, the Robovan. A sleek, elongated vehicle with smooth curves, minimal windows, and a design philosophy that seemed to reject everything we associate with modern transportation. This wasn't just another typical concept vehicle destined to gather dust in a museum or disappear into forgotten archives. This was Musk's bet on the future of urban mass transit, and it was bigger than anyone had anticipated. 20 seats, no driver, no steering wheel, no pedals. One vision of how cities could move people in the decades ahead. At first glance, the Robovan appears almost alien. Its aesthetic draws directly from Art Deco design, specifically the streamlined locomotives that defined the 1920s and 1930s. Long, low-slung, and remarkably smooth. It sits somewhere between a bus and a train, between the past and an imagined future. The exterior features a single slim headlight across its front, multiple bands running around the body, and a total absence of the visual clutter we've come to expect from vehicles. There are no visible windows on the front or rear, no dashboard poking. Train from the 1930s, Musk responded directly with a target emoji. The message was crystal clear. The comparison was exactly on point. This wasn't a designer extrapolating some vague concept of future aesthetics. This was calculated, referenced, and purposeful. Inside, the Robovan is configured for maximum flexibility and passenger optimization. Multiple rows of seats face each other across the interior space, deliberately encouraging a social environment rather than isolation. Wall-mounted displays sit at both ends of the cabin, providing information, entertainment, or real-time navigation details to all passengers simultaneously. A sliding door opens on one side for passenger boarding and exit, while two panes of glass panels run alongside the roof, providing panoramic views for passengers who want to see and experience the city around them. The entire interior is designed around a central principle that Musk emphasized repeatedly throughout the event: comfort and passenger experience. Without a driver position, without a steering wheel, without pedals, without all the mechanical and safety apparatus required for human operation and control, the entire interior space can be optimized for passenger experience and comfort rather than the mechanical requirements of steering and braking control. But here's where the feasibility question becomes critical. The design is revolutionary, yes. The vision is compelling. The potential is enormous. But can Tesla actually build it? And more importantly, can they make it work as an autonomous vehicle at scale without drivers, without safety operators, without human intervention? The first challenge is fundamentally technical. The Robovan will rely entirely on Tesla's full self-driving software, specifically an unsupervised version that the company is still actively developing. Let's be clear about what this means. Tesla currently operates with supervised autonomous driving capabilities on the Model 3, Model Y, and other vehicles in beta testing. Supervised autonomous driving means exactly what it sounds like. While the car can drive itself, a human is expected to remain attentive and ready to take control at a moment's notice. That human is essentially babysitting the AI, ready to intervene if something goes wrong. Moving to unsupervised autonomous driving, where the vehicle operates completely without human intervention, without drivers, without safety operators, is not an incremental step. This is a massive qualitative leap in complexity and risk. This is the technology that Musk says will power both the Cybercab and the Robovan. Tesla's timeline for this transition is genuinely aggressive. Musk has publicly stated that unsupervised driving could begin in Texas and California by 2025, initially with the Model 3. If that happens on schedule, and if those limited deployments perform well, then theoretically scaling that technology to a larger vehicle like the Robovan becomes possible by 2027. But if there's a delay, and there's frequently a delay, if there are unexpected regulatory hurdles, if the safety data doesn't support broader rollout, or if there are edge cases the AI hasn't learned to handle, the entire timeline shifts backward, sometimes significantly backward. The technical challenge is compounded by the fact that scaling full self-driving from a sedan like the Model 3 to a larger vehicle like the Robovan introduces entirely new variables and parameters that the system must learn. The vehicle's size means different sight lines from the cameras, different stopping, distances and braking characteristics, different maneuverability requirements and turning radiuses. A 3-ton sedan and a much larger multi-passenger vehicle handle obstacles differently. They turn differently. They brake differently. They have different mass distributions and momentum. Characteristics. The AI system trained primarily on sedan data would need to adapt and learn in the context of a larger vehicle with different physical properties. This isn't insurmountable or impossible, but it's a non-trivial engineering challenge that adds considerable complexity to the development process. Looking at Musk's historical track record with timelines provides invaluable context for evaluating the 2027 Robovan claim. The Cybertruck is perhaps the most instructive example. Announced in 2015 with promises of production by 2020, then pushed to 2021, then to 2022, then to 2023. The vehicle only began actual production in late 2023, a full 8 years after the initial announcement. When it finally arrived, it faced immediate production challenges, quality control issues, and manufacturing complexity that many observers had anticipated during those years of delays. The Semi was promised for 2019, specifically promised to begin production then. It didn't enter limited production until 2023, a 4-year slip. The original Tesla Roadster, the next generation version, designed to compete with traditional supercars, was supposed to launch in 2020. As of 2024, years later, it still hasn't been delivered to customers. Even full self-driving itself, promised as a feature-complete product multiple times over the past 5 years, remains in beta and under active development. It's still not complete. The pattern across all these projects is unmistakable. Musk's timelines are typically optimistic, often dramatically so. This isn't random bad luck or unexpected circumstances. It's a consistent pattern across multiple major projects. When Musk announced the Robovan would be in production before 2027, he actually acknowledged this very tendency. Standing on stage in front of an audience, he said the words, "I tend to be a little optimistic with timeframes." This is perhaps the most honest and transparent thing anyone associated with Tesla says about the company's timelines. For someone with Musk's documented track record, before 2027 could mean anywhere from 2027 to 2029 or even beyond. It's a statement that simultaneously commits to a date while providing psychological insurance against missing it. It's also remarkable in its candor. He's basically telling the audience, I know I'm usually late, and this might be late too, but it's still going to happen. The regulatory environment adds another substantial layer of complexity that shouldn't be underestimated. Current vehicle regulations in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere were written with human drivers at the center of operation. Safety standards, liability frameworks, insurance requirements, and traffic laws all assume someone is responsible for operating the vehicle. All of them assume there's a person you can hold accountable. A fully autonomous Robovan carrying 20 passengers creates entirely new legal questions that regulators haven't fully answered yet. Which entity is liable if the Robovan causes an accident? Is it Tesla? Is it the fleet operator? Is it the city that approved the vehicle's operation? What about passengers themselves? Can you require them to carry insurance? How do authorities enforce traffic laws on a vehicle with no driver to cite or fine? Who's responsible for maintenance? Who signs off on safety? These aren't academic questions. They're fundamental legal questions that need answers before mass deployment can occur, and the regulatory processes typically move much slower than engineering development cycles. Regulators are cautious. They move carefully. They consider liability carefully. They move at the pace of bureaucracy, not the pace of Silicon Valley innovation. Tesla has made progress with autonomous vehicle regulations. To be fair, the company already operates autonomous taxis under special permits in California and other states. But these are limited deployments with specific routes and carefully controlled conditions. The robots only operate in certain areas. Scaling to something like the Robovan, operating across multiple cities, carrying larger numbers of passengers, requires regulatory approval on a scale and scope Tesla hasn't yet achieved. The federal, highway administration at the federal level, individual state transportation departments, city transportation authorities, and local governments all have roles to play. Insurance regulators need to weigh in. Safety agencies need to evaluate data. No timeline can guarantee their cooperation. No engineering schedule can force regulatory approval. If the regulatory process takes longer than expected, and it usually does, the entire project timeline extends. Regulatory approval isn't something you can negotiate your way around quickly through efficiency or innovation. Then there's the question of infrastructure. The Robovan is designed for urban environments, particularly for high-density areas where mass transit is needed most. But the existing road systems in most cities around the world were designed primarily for human drivers. for vehicles from past eras. Traffic signals are positioned for human sight lines. Road markings follow conventions established over decades. Urban planning and zoning assume vehicles will have certain characteristics and capabilities. The Robovan, with its low ground clearance and specialized design, might require urban infrastructure adaptations in many cities. Parking requirements might need to be rethought. Charging infrastructure would need installation at scale. Integration with existing traffic systems would need coordination. Bus stops might need modification. Traffic patterns might need adjustment. A single new vehicle type shouldn't require massive infrastructure overhauls, but the more different and specialized the vehicle, the more adaptations might be necessary. Cities move slowly on infrastructure. They move even more slowly than regulators sometimes. Musk did address one practical concern at the event. The Robovan features an automatic load-leveling suspension system that adjusts the vehicle's height based on road conditions. This is significant because it shows Tesla is thinking about real-world challenges like navigating uneven surfaces, potholes, cracked pavement, and varying road, conditions that exist in actual cities. But it's one engineering solution among many that will be needed for a vehicle to operate reliably at scale. The suspension system needs to be tested extensively under diverse conditions, across different climates, different seasons, different road surfaces. Durability testing takes time. Maintenance requirements must be documented. Long-term reliability must be proven. All of these factors will ultimately impact whether the Robovan can operate economically at the costs Musk is projecting. A suspension system that needs rebuilding every 50,000 miles, for example, would dramatically increase operating costs and eliminate much of the economic advantage Musk is claiming. Speaking of economics, that's where the Robovan's real potential lies, and where the feasibility question becomes most tangible. Musk suggested the cost of operation could be as low as 5 to 10 cents per mile. For comparison, a typical rideshare service in urban areas costs passengers between $2 to $5 per mile. That's a Robotaxi or Uber or Lyft ride. If the Robovan can deliver passengers at 1/10 or less of that cost, it fundamentally changes the entire economics of transportation in cities. It makes mass transit obsolete. It makes private car ownership economic nonsense. It creates an entirely new transportation paradigm. But achieving those economics requires multiple pieces to align perfectly in concert. The vehicle must be manufactured at a cost that allows for sustainable pricing while maintaining profit margins or subsidy levels. The autonomous system must work reliably enough to eliminate human drivers entirely and eliminate dispatch infrastructure and costs. Maintenance and energy costs must remain predictable and relatively low across the vehicle's operational lifetime. Battery degradation must not undermine the economics significantly, and the operational volume must reach sufficient scale to amortize the initial investment in development, manufacturing infrastructure, and fleet deployment. Every one of these factors must work correctly. Here's the stark reality of what Tesla is attempting. Tesla has never built a large passenger vehicle designed specifically and exclusively for autonomous operation. The Cybertruck is autonomous capable and equipped with autonomous driving hardware, but it was designed fundamentally as a conventional vehicle first, designed for human operation first. The Model 3 and Model Y can use full self-driving software, but they have traditional human-focused interiors and controls. They have steering wheels, they have pedals, they have dashboards. They're designed for people to operate manually. The Robovan would be Tesla's first purpose-built autonomous transit vehicle from the ground up. That means every single subsystem, the suspension that we discussed, the steering systems, the power distribution architecture, the environmental controls, the safety systems, the redundancy systems, must be designed from scratch with autonomous operation in mind. This isn't tweaking an existing platform. This is building something entirely new. This is exponentially more complex than adding autonomous software to an existing vehicle architecture. Manufacturing represents another significant feasibility challenge that deserves serious consideration and attention. Tesla currently produces vehicles at several locations globally: Fremont in California, the Texas factory, Berlin in Germany, and Shanghai in China. Ramping production of an entirely new vehicle platform while simultaneously maintaining and expanding current output of existing models is operationally demanding and requires careful planning. It requires substantial capital investment. It requires significant engineering attention and resources. It requires specialized manufacturing expertise and new tooling. The Cybertruck's launch demonstrated both Tesla's capability to ramp production relatively quickly and the real challenges and delays that can inevitably arise when attempting to do so at scale. The Robovan would require similar or even greater manufacturing flexibility and complexity given its novel design. Building thousands of vehicles annually by 2027 or 2028 would require significant capital investment in new production facilities or significant retooling and adaptation of existing facilities. It would require manufacturing tooling designed specifically and uniquely for this vehicle. While Tesla certainly has access to capital markets and investor confidence, those resources would be diverted from other projects. Every dollar and every engineer spent on Robovan production ramp is a dollar an engineer not spent on Cybertruck refinement, Model 3 continuous improvements, or other strategic initiatives the company might pursue. Safety validation is perhaps the most critical and time-consuming aspect of the entire feasibility question. Before the Robovan can carry 20 passengers on public roads without a driver, without a safety operator, without any human control, it must undergo extensive, rigorous testing. Tesla will need to demonstrate definitively to regulators, to insurance companies, and to the public that the autonomous system can handle the vast majority of driving scenarios safely and reliably. This means millions of miles of testing across different weather conditions, traffic patterns, and urban environments. Rain, snow, fog, clear skies, calm traffic, congested traffic, rush hour, late night. The company will need to document every failure, every edge case, and every scenario where the system might perform suboptimally or fail. Insurance companies will want to see this data in detail. Regulators will demand it before approval. Potential customers and their insurers will expect it. Building confidence in a system that carries 20 people safely requires substantially more validation than current autonomous vehicle deployments have achieved. Tesla's existing full self-driving program provides a foundation for this validation effort. The company has collected billions of miles of driving data from vehicles equipped with its cameras and sensors. This accumulated data is invaluable for training neural networks and identifying edge cases that the AI might encounter. However, moving from supervised driving with humans, ready to intervene, to operating on public roads with passengers in a vehicle, without steering, wheels or pedals, represents a qualitative leap in risk. It's not just a bigger step, it's a different kind of step. The validation burden increases proportionally to the number of passengers at risk and the level of automation involved. 20 people in a vehicle with no manual controls is radically different from a single person in a car that can still be steered manually if needed. One factor that could accelerate feasibility is if Tesla achieves a significant breakthrough in artificial intelligence or autonomous driving capability. The company has made impressive progress with its camera-based approach to autonomous driving. Unlike some competitors who rely heavily on LiDAR and other advanced sensors, Tesla uses primarily visual input from cameras, arguing that this approach mirrors human perception more closely. If Tesla's AI systems achieve a step function improvement, a sudden dramatic leap in capability rather than incremental progress, the timeline for the Robovan could accelerate substantially. Conversely, if progress stalls or if the company encounters unexpected technical challenges or limitations in the AI system, the timeline would extend. The competitive landscape also influences feasibility calculations. General Motors' Cruise origin was an autonomous people-moving vehicle concept, very similar conceptually to the Robovan. GM canceled the project in 2024 after a series of incidents and regulatory challenges. That's instructive. A competitor attempted a similar vision and couldn't make the business case work. Waymo operates autonomous taxis in limited deployments but hasn't announced plans for large passenger vehicles. Chinese companies like Baidu are working on autonomous vehicles and autonomous transit solutions for their market. If competitors make genuine progress in autonomous transit before Tesla, it could establish regulatory precedents that make Tesla's path either easier or harder, depending on how those precedents are structured and what outcomes those deployments achieve. Conversely, if Tesla is first to successfully deploy autonomous transit, the company effectively gets to shape how regulators worldwide think about autonomous vehicles carrying large numbers of passengers, which could be a significant strategic advantage. Musk's commitment to the Robovan appears genuinely held. He didn't just show a concept rendering or a computer-generated image. Tesla built an actual physical prototype and drove it on stage in front of hundreds of invited spectators. He didn't hedge the statement with caveats or conditionals about whether it would actually be produced. He explicitly said, "We're going to make this, and it's going to look like that." This level of commitment and clarity, combined with Tesla's track record of eventually delivering on its core promises, electric vehicles definitely exist and are being produced at massive scale. The Cybertruck did eventually arrive after years of delays. Autonomous driving capabilities do continue expanding and improving, suggests the Robovan will eventually be produced. The question is really about timing and scale, not about whether it will happen at all. It's not a question of if, but when and how many and at what cost. For perspective on timelines, consider the historical pattern. The Cybertruck was first announced in 2015, then shown as a concept vehicle in 2019. and finally began actual production in 2023. That's 8 years from initial announcement to actual production. Beginning. 8 years. The Roadster, Tesla's next-generation sports car, was announced for production in 2020. As of 2024, years later, it still hasn't been delivered to customers. The timeline inflation is built into Tesla's organizational DNA at this point. It's not a bug. It's practically a feature of how the company operates. A 2027 date for Robovan production, interpreted through this historical lens and this pattern of delays, might realistically translate to 2028 or 2029 or even 2030. Still ambitious, still genuinely transformative if achieved, but extending the feasibility question and the timeline further into the future. The practical rollout would likely follow a familiar pattern that Tesla has established. Initial production runs would be small, possibly limited to specific geographic areas with favorable regulations, sympathetic city governments, and existing infrastructure. Operational partners, transportation companies, city transit authorities, or commercial fleet operators would be the first customers rather than private consumers buying individually. As reliability is proven through operational experience, and as economies of scale are achieved through increased production volumes, deployment could expand to additional markets and cities. Full-scale production serving diverse customers across multiple regions and countries might not occur until the early 2030s, even if 2027 or 2028 sees first commercial deliveries. What would genuine success look like for the Robovan? For the Robovan to be considered feasible and actually successful in practical terms, several things need to happen in concert. First, Tesla must deliver working prototypes that operate reliably in real-world urban conditions without human intervention or safety operators. Second, regulators across major markets must establish a legal and regulatory framework that permits autonomous large passenger vehicles operating without drivers. Third, the economics must work. The vehicle must cost reasonable to manufacture and maintain while delivering the promised low operating costs. Fourth, the public must be willing to trust the technology, actively accepting rides in vehicles without human drivers. Fifth, cities and urban planning authorities must embrace the technology and adapt infrastructure as needed. Sixth, insurance companies must be willing to insure these vehicles at rates that make the operation economically viable. Each of these prerequisites is individually achievable. Tesla can build reliable autonomous vehicles. The company is already doing so in limited deployments today. Regulators can create frameworks for autonomous vehicles. They're actively working on establishing these frameworks right now. The economics could work if engineering challenges are solved and manufacturing reaches efficient scale. Public acceptance will grow as autonomous technology becomes more visible and demonstrates reliable safety records. Cities have adapted to new transportation technologies before and can do so again. Insurance companies will eventually price these vehicles appropriately once they have sufficient operational data. But all of these things need to happen simultaneously or in close sequence for the Robovan to become a viable mass market product by the late 2020s. That's the challenge. The feasibility question ultimately comes down to this fundamental assessment. Tesla is attempting something genuinely ambitious, but not impossible or unrealistic. The company has the engineering talent, the financial resources, and the manufacturing capability to build the Robovan. What remains uncertain is the precise timing and the regulatory environment across different jurisdictions. The 2027 production date is almost certainly too optimistic, given Tesla's historical patterns and the genuine complexity of autonomous vehicle regulation and deployment. But a 2028 or 2029 date seems plausible if development proceeds well. A 2030 date would be well within historical norms for Tesla's ambitious projects and would still represent genuinely rapid development. If the Robovan does arrive in the next 3 to 5 years or so, it would represent a genuine revolution in urban transportation. A vehicle that carries 20 people, requires no driver to operate, operates at a tenth of current rideshare costs, and features revolutionary design would fundamentally transform cities. It would accelerate the obsolescence of private vehicle ownership, make public transit more flexible and responsive to demand, and fundamentally alter urban infrastructure and planning assumptions. The scale of potential impact and disruption justifies the investment Musk and Tesla are making in this project. This isn't just an incremental improvement to existing transportation. This could be transformative. But feasibility isn't determined by potential impact or ambition. It's determined by whether the project can actually be executed, given real-world constraints, regulations, and limitations. Based on current evidence, Tesla can almost certainly build a working Robovan prototype. The core technology exists, or is very close to existing. The engineering challenges, while genuinely significant, are solvable with sufficient talent and resources. The manufacturing capability can be developed and scaled. What remains genuinely uncertain is whether all of these pieces can come together in the time frame before 2027. or whether Tesla's habitual timeline optimism will require the typical 2 to 3 year extension that characterizes most of the company's ambitious projects. The safest prediction based on evidence is that the Tesla Robovan will eventually exist and will eventually revolutionize transportation, even if not on the originally stated timeline. When exactly that happens, however, remains an open question that only time will definitively answer. For now, it exists in that liminal space between feasible and speculative, between engineering vision and operational reality. It's a space Elon Musk and Tesla have become quite comfortable occupying over the years. Whether he can move the Robovan from that space to the actual roads of cities worldwide by 2027 remains genuinely uncertain. But if his track record and Tesla's history teaches us anything, the attempt itself will be fascinating to watch and follow, regardless of whether the official 2027 timeline ultimately holds.